Welcome to Beatmaking for Beginners. In this episode, I'll be demonstrating various ways to chop samples. These are just methods that I've used over the years but can be applied to other software and hardware platforms. Chopping a sample in music production means to take segments of a record and rearrange them to create a new composition. All digital audio workstations have the ability to chop samples and then sequence them into new compositions. There's also the classic Akai MPC, as well as the new Native Instruments machine. The two methods that I'll be demonstrating are chopping by waveform and chopping by ear. Both of these methods achieve the same goal, but just use different tools to do it. For the waveform method, I use Recycle to create Rex files. For more information on Rex files, check out my previous tutorial, The Beat Goes On. The reason I call it the waveform method is because you can see the waveform in Recycle and use it to help you. The samples that I bring into Recycle usually have drums in them, so it's easy to follow the rhythm. In this Rex file, I took an 8-bar loop, imported it into Recycle, and then made selections or chops on the quarter notes. One thing to keep in mind is that it's important to use your ear as well as the visual of the waveform, because you'll hear elements in the song that you can select that you might not see right away. And to make those fine selections, you'll need to zoom in closer. So here's the selection that I made of SoundForge from this song, and I'm going to import it into the NNXT. And now I'm going to change the root note, which is where the sample starts on the keyboard. Right now it's at C3. I'm going to move it down to C1. When I hit C1 on my MIDI keyboard, alright, now that I have the root note started at C1, I'm going to change my low and my high keys so that it starts at C1 and ends at C1. Basically what that does is that C1 is the only key that plays that sample. That's how I make my first chop. Now I'm going to change the start and the end point. Now this is why I call this method chopping by ear, because instead of using my waveform like I would in Recycle, I'm using my ear by changing the start and the end points using the percentages. So you have to use your ears here. Now that I have my first chop made on the NNXT, I'm going to copy and paste this so that I can make 4 chops. So what I can do is copy and paste using Control C and Control V. And I have to do the same thing that I did for the first one to put it on C1. So I go in, I change the root note to C sharp, and the high and low key to C sharp. For the third chop, change it to D, the root note to D, and high and low to D. And last, change the root note to D sharp, high and low key to D sharp. Now what I did there was hit the notes C, C sharp, D, and D sharp, and they all trigger the same sample. So now what I'm going to do is change the start and the end point so that I can make my chops, and I have to do all this by ear. Now let's work on C sharp. So right now it's starting at 4%. So what we want to do is change the start point to where the first sample ends. The first sample ended at about 17.6%, so we want to start there at least. Alright, actually we want to bring it down to 16.8. That's where the second chop starts for me. Just want to fine tune the endpoint so that we get the whole chop. Alright, now so far we've got C and C sharp. Next up is D. Alright, so we ended at about 28%, so we'll go there for the start point. Now as you can see, this process is a little bit tedious, which is why I call it chopping by ear, because you have to use your ears instead of using your waveform. And the last chop started on 41% at least. Alright, now here's all the 4 chops individually. Now what I did here I could also do in Recycle, but this is just another method for using it in Reason. Now after fine tuning the chops that I made, I used the filter to take out some of the high frequencies in the sample, and I made a beat. Here's what I came up with. Thanks for watching Beatmaking for Beginners. If you have any suggestions for tutorials, you can leave them in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel and visit my blog for all updates from Sure Shot Media.